Tom, you split your work time across projects with our BC universities, in California with a statewide initiative in the community colleges, and back in your Ontario home base across both colleges and universities. I know you see each of these projects as pieces in a larger puzzle across the various higher ed sectors and systems they involve. Can you give us a snapshot of the common thread that ties these together for you?
That's a good question. There is a common thread, at least in my mind, and that is this notion that we are creating institutional strategies, either institutional or system strategies, for exemplary teaching and learning environments. Exemplary to us has some very specific meanings. There are really four aspects of it. The first one's kind of obvious. You want the exemplary environment to produce high quality outcomes for students. But those outcomes should include student learning outcomes as we normally talk about them. And in addition, some of the things that are harder to define. Maybe we'll get into that later on. The second way that we use the term exemplary is that what we produce as teachers by way of learning resources or teaching practices, that we need to share and adapt with the colleagues in our professional teaching community.
Right.
So our teaching is exemplary for our colleagues, as well as producing exemplary results for our students.
Cool. I know you've been working with our team and also with academic departments here to think of our teaching and learning as work within a professional knowledge community.
Mm-hmm.
I heard some of that in what you just said about sharing exemplary resources and practices. Where does research and the scholarship of teaching and learning fit in? That's kind of going to be an important part of our university's teaching and learning strategy.
Right. So that idea of teaching as an activity that takes place in a professional knowledge community. I borrowed some language there from my colleague Jim Stigler at UCLA.
Okay.
From the K-12 sector. So
Right.
it's not new there. It's a little newer in higher ed. And there's three kinds of knowledge that we think our faculty have to bring into the teaching environment. One is the exemplary practices and resources from colleagues that we just talked about. Second is the evidence from research, which might have to be adapted and customized locally. And the third kind of knowledge is your insights about the local context, which is your institution, the kinds of students who are in the class there, because you're not just teaching mathematics, you're teaching mathematics to students here using your particular strengths and what they bring to the classroom. So those are the kinds of knowledge, and then applying that as your application and your generation of new knowledge becomes more systematic, then you move into applied research to address your particular challenges, and then potentially into more generalizable research that, to use Shirk's term, extends the general body of knowledge in your domain.
Right.
In this case, the domain is teaching in the areas that you teach.
Teaching in that discipline. So you mentioned four aspects of exemplary teaching and learning. So two of those aspects are high quality results in terms of student learning outcomes, and sharing exemplary resources and practices in a professional community of fellow teachers. What other aspects do you see beyond that?
So we are kind of pushing the envelope here a bit. The third use of exemplary that we make, it builds on a quote from my favorite meta teacher, Parker Palmer. How we teach is a key part of what we teach.
Right.
Now, Parker was using that in the context of a U.S. liberal arts college and building character. We call them colleges of character. In the public higher education system, we're more focused on intellectual character. But there, our work as faculty can be exemplary for our students of the kinds of engagements with knowledge that they should be undertaking in their professional lives, and also in their roles as community members and global citizens. So if the way we use knowledge in our teaching and generate knowledge and share knowledge, all those kinds of knowledge-intensive activities, if we can not only do that, but share it with the students, make it transparent to them, demonstrate those values to them, then we're immersing them in a knowledge-intensive organization and exposing them to the kind of organization that we want them to join and develop and found and all those things.
After they graduate.
Yeah. So, that's exemplary at an institutional level. One teacher doesn't make that difference. This is an across the curriculum exemplary environment. That was the third one. And then the fourth one is really at a strategic level. And this is new stuff. We're just beginning that here in BC.
Yep.
to say that if we're in public higher education, there's a system of peers, and yet we all should be having differentiated roles so that the whole becomes more than just the sum of the parts. In terms of a teaching and learning environment, that means that your university here, for example, would produce a particular leadership capability in your case, professional learning and knowledge networking. That's
Right.
part of the teaching and learning strategy that you're putting together. Another institution might take the leadership role in some other aspect of outcomes that students develop, which, as we just said, are also outcomes that faculty develop.
Right.
So if we're able to do that, and different institutions develop different capabilities in both students and faculty, share those and raise the bar for everyone, then we've got a strategically exemplary system. Now, nobody's done that yet. This is Tom's dream. But I think that is what could really distinguish us as a system
Right.
rather than just as individual institutions.
Very interesting. So, how does the HECO research study on emerging developments in online learning fit into this big picture?
Okay. I'll highlight some of those in the stuff to follow, but one thing that came out, for example, we started with very strong awareness of the financial constraints that our system in Ontario, your system here in BC, folks in California, we're all facing this because of factors that are outside our control, demographics and so on. So productivity was in the title from day one, and that was part of the mandate. We did highlight in the report some instances in the US where institutions were facing a do or be done to situation with their state legislatures, where we weren't moving fast enough, and so the legislators felt a need to intervene to help us move a little faster in ways that weren't necessarily as well informed as we would have liked. So it's a bit of a threat, do or be done to. So there's financial and political rationales for looking at quality and productivity by leveraging emerging developments in online learning. But really, we think the key rationale has to be pedagogical. Even if we had lots more money, and even if we had the friendliest legislature in the world, we're not too badly off in Ontario. We should still be looking at these elements, and for the reasons that we just talked about. In order to be exemplary for our students, if they don't see us as high-value, innovation-friendly, knowledge-intensive, then we're not immersing them in the kind of workplace that we want them to adopt.
Right.
This is, to paraphrase Gandhi, be the change that you want your students to make in the world.
Right.
As an example. So you see MIT and Stanford, for example, we cited their work in the report to say, they really don't have the same financial constraints that we do. They don't have their private institutions, they don't have the same issues in terms of potential government intervention, but they're leaders in this. Why is that? Because they feel if they're not leveraging technology to let them free up resources to do what really matters most in their mission, they're not serving as good examples for their students. So that's one of the ways that the picture ties together for me at
Interesting.
least.
Thanks. So, I've kind of heard that you hold the Air Canada Chair of Teaching and Learning.
Yeah,
What's all that about?
It's Chair 12C, actually, some days. But there are synergies between these various projects in the different sectors and different systems. So what we're doing in California is actually building on a research project we did at HECO with the colleges and universities in Ontario a few years ago. What we're doing here in BC in terms of outcomes is going to feed into the new HECO project that I'm a small part of the team on assessing program level learning outcomes. So there's synergies here, and things are going to come together.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you,
for your
Lisa,
insights.
for helping out. Those of you watching in Toronto, we're going to flip over to some visuals where I'll highlight some other aspects of the report, and then David and I will throw it open for more questions and discussion.